is our 170-year-old cottonwood tree. It had a twin that we lost last October and took out the corner of the building. That was fun. So that's shades of green. So we're here today to talk about native Texas perennials, and they have several benefits, one of which is they're low maintenance. And they are low maintenance because, clicker, maybe I have to be closer. Well said. I killed it. No. Okay, got that back. There we go. They're low maintenance, and because they're low maintenance, they're going to save you time and money. You don't need to fuss. A lot of these plants will thrive on neglect. You put them in the ground, walk away, ignore them. I will tell you that about 80% of the plant problems that we diagnose at the nursery on a daily basis are people overwatering. They'll see a plant that's looking a little off, and they immediately start dumping water on it. And then it may have been dry to begin with, but after day 3 of them constantly watering it, it gets waterlogged. You don't need to water a lot of these plants. Most of them are very drought tolerant. Okay, it's a very gentle touch here, but it's clearly don't have. So because they're so drought tolerant, you're not going to need a lot of water. These, as you will see here in just a moment, a lot of these plants have incredibly deep roots, much deeper than a lot of the plants that most of you have maybe in your front flower bed. They're also going to be a paradise for pollinators. They're going to attract a lot of bees, butterflies, hummingbirds, native species that evolve with these plants here we're in Collin County. We're at the southern end of the Blackland Prairie. That's a heavy black clay that is horrible to try to grow a tomato in, but is wonderful for tall grasses. And then obviously because they're native, they look like they belong here because they belong here. That's the biggest advantage. Now, this is a chart that will illustrate the root system of a lot of these plants. Some of these aren't native to here, they're native to the Great Plains that are from Oklahoma north. But the idea is the same. In general, a lot of your native perennials have a root system that is 2 to 4 to 5 times greater than the height of the plant. Everyone see this little grass-like thing here on the far left, where the roots barely a foot long, well, not even a foot long, about 4 inches? That's your turf grass. That would be your Bermuda and your St. Augustine that a lot of people have in their lawns. Thank you, HOAs. Compare that to buffalo grass, which is a native grass to the Great Plains, but it has roots 7 feet deep. So I would rather have that in my yard because I won't need to water it nearly as much. But as you can see, like this is where's my coneflower? Right there. So my coneflower, we got roots over 4 feet deep. And then over here, this is a blazing star, a Beatrice. There's a native Texas version of this plant, roots 15 feet deep. I promise you, people will tell us all the time, well, I think the plant's dry. I said, yeah, if you touch the ground, maybe, but get a moisture meter, like Wilson's gonna give you at the end of the class here, shove that into the ground 6 or 8 inches, you might see it wet. And even if it says dry, dig a hole 3 feet deep. I promise you, you're gonna have black clay sticking to your shovel. Our heavy clay soil holds a lot of water, especially at depth. And these natives have adapted over thousands and thousands of years to find that water. So in the middle of summer, again, you rarely need to worry about them once they get established. The first year is the only year you really need to watch them. After that, they'll do their own thing. Now, for those of you who don't know, we are in Zone 8A according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And basically what that means is that on average, last February notwithstanding, our average temperature range in the winter is between 10 and 15 degrees. And I will tell you that the blessing of last February, a lot of these perennials are dormant, so they weren't even above ground yet, but most of them at the nursery came back without any problem. On all of our slides that I'm about to show you, you will see the zone hardiness, and you'll note that every plant that I'm going to show you, Zone 8 is within the range. So I'm not going to show you anything that will not grow here in Collin County. And a little bit of vocabulary before we get started, because you're going to see this in all the slides as well. When I say deciduous, if I'm talking about a woody perennial, like a skullcap, that means that the plant will drop all of its leaves, but it's not going to disappear. So that plant will be naked in the winter. We won't have anything on it in January, February, probably December. and then it'll leaf out again once the temperatures warm up. If it's herbaceous, it will die back to the ground completely and disappear. You won't see it. And if you don't remember where you planted it, you might forget that it was there. So that's what we're talking about when we say deciduous and herbaceous. So let's get going. We'll start at the ground and work our way up. Ground covers. Now, there's a lot of native ground covers that people have never heard of, and we sell them and grow them all at Shades of Green. That's one thing I forgot to mention. Shades of Green, we have our own growing operation up in Collinsville, which is about, go to Salina, make a left, head toward Lake Tioga, you'll find our growing operation. We grow 200 different species or cultivars of perennials and about 40 to 50,000 plants a year. So we grow a lot of the plants that I'm about to show you. Ground covers. Horse herb. This is a wonderful, low growing ground cover. It's very short, only about 6 inches tall at most. If you buy a little 4-inch cup of it, it will spread to 2 feet wide, so it covers some ground. It's great for erosion control. We have this growing along the bank of our creek on the property. It loves to be in dappled or afternoon shade, and it has this tiny yellow flower on it. That flower, if you think about 1/3 the size of a dime, it's a small flower, but there could be hundreds of them over the plant, and it makes this nice thick mat of this bright green foliage with these little bitty yellow flowers. Wonderful little shade-loving or shade-happy ground cover. Most people have never heard about this. Sometimes at other nurseries you might see it called straggler daisy, and we're at the northern end of its zone. It's hardy from here down to the southern coast of Florida. Next is frog fruit, and this is a pretty little flower. Pink on the inside, white on the outside. Those flowers are a little bit larger than a dime, maybe a nickel size, I guess, if it's really, really happy. This is one that will do full sun or part shade. Also, again, low growing, only 3 to 6 inches tall, spreads. You can also, another name for this, a little older name, is the turkey tangled frog fruit. I've never had anyone come in and ask for turkey tangled frog fruit, but again, hardy to zone 7, so that would get you up in Oklahoma. Like small white flowers bloom heavily in the spring. It takes the summer off, and then they'll come back and bloom again in the fall.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Traffic strong?
I would say horse herb a little bit. Frog fruit, probably not so much. I wouldn't let a dog run back and forth on this, but if it's 1 or 2 people walking through every now and then, horse herb would hold up pretty well. Frog fruit, not so much. So the question was, are these steppable? Could you walk on them and not kill them? Horse herb, yes. Frog fruit, not so much. And feel free to raise your hand, but I do have a lot of slides. If you'd like, my preference would be let me get to the end of the presentation and I'll take questions. Otherwise, this will be an all afternoon thing. Moving on, prairie verbena. There are lots of verbenas out there, especially annual varieties that come in bright reds and pinks with stripes and all kinds of weird colors. This is verbena bipithinata. It's the native one. It's going to have a light blue, some might say lavender color to it. It can look a bit scraggly when it's first starting off, and I will say that a lot of these perennials don't look that impressive when they're sitting in a pot on the table, because as I showed you, they have, a lot of them want to have deep, deep roots, and when they're stuck in a little 1-gallon pot, they don't have enough room to really stretch out and go. But prairie verbena will bloom consistently from spring through fall. And 6 inches, I've seen it get a little taller. If it's really happy, it might pop up to 10 inches or so. And then does spread easily 2 feet, maybe a little bit more once it's established. This one is, in a mild winter it might stay green, but consider this one herbaceous. I don't know why it's not on the first line, but this one will typically die back and then return every year without fail. And then woolly stomodia. This is one that I find that almost nobody's ever heard of. I love, love, love this ground cover because you get this silvery gray foliage. Right after a rain, it'll green up a bit. And back when we were having all that rain in May, I thought this was going to drown. About the only way to kill this plant is to overwater it. I would not put it on top of a drip system that was running every day. This is literally a plant that we plant on the side garden of our demonstration garden on the side of our building, and it might get watered once a month in the summer. We leave it alone. It does have a tiny, tiny little flower, but no one buys woolly stomodia for the flower because it's insignificant. It's going to be tiny and lavender, and you've got to be looking really close to see it. and incredibly hardy. It spreads like crazy. Definitely want to plant it in full sun. It'll take a little shade, but if it's in a lot of shade, you're not going to see it spread, and it might be a little greener than white with a silvery color. And here's what it looks like in our garden at work. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's only 5 or 6 plants. And that's a span of about 20 feet. And it's growing at the base of some blackfoot daisy and some autumn sage and some of the plants I'm about to talk about. So that's woolly stomonia. If you're looking for a really low ground cover, I mean like 3 to 4 inches tall and 3 feet wide, woolly stomonia is great if it's in a hot, dry area. Don't put it in a flower bed that you're going to water constantly. It will not be happy. All right, pollinator favorites, because a lot of people are really into attracting wildlife to the yard. Butterflies, bees, hummingbirds, songbirds. So let's go through some of these. The classic purple coneflower. If you've been to a nursery in the last 10 years, you've seen they come out with all different colors of echinacea. I have found, and this year I proved it, because I planted 6 different varieties. One, the native Texas echinacea purpurea, and then several other colored varieties. All the colored ones crashed in the middle of summer. I've never seen a hybrid or highly cultivated echinacea. If it comes in bright orange or yellow or white, they all crash in the middle of the summer. My purple coneflowers in the demonstration garden at work are still in full bloom. All the others are crispy and brown. So just keep that in mind. If you can find the native purple one, it's going to go like gangbusters. It reseeds freely. If you plant 1, next year you'll have 10, and next year you'll have 50. A few years ago, I pulled 30 of them out of my ex-wife's backyard because they just went nuts. They reseeded. The birds will eat the seed, but I promise you they won't eat all of them. So a little deadheading will help keep it under control. Full sun, not a problem. The best blooms I've ever had is when they got a little shade from like 3 o'clock until the sunset. If they get a little shade in that hottest part of the day, the color seems to last longer. These can easily get 3 feet tall. Beautiful, beautiful plant, really tough, native Texas plant. It's absolutely the best coneflower out there. Texas Lantana, you see this all over the place. There are other Lantanas. There's Dallas Red, that's a different it's a different species of Lantana. When you go to a nursery, you'll see some Lantana over on the annual table, and then you'll see some Lantana over on the perennial table. This is the perennial version, Lantana horta. It's also been renamed to Lantana urticoides. This thing will get, if you let it, and I proved this, it will get 5 feet tall and 6 or 7 feet wide. If you don't want it that big, you can prune the living daylights out of this thing and it won't mind. I mean, you can hack it so low that you think you're going to kill it, and it'll just leaf out and keep blooming. It blooms all season long. It takes forever to wake up in the spring, but I wouldn't expect to see a leaf on it until end of March, early April, and probably not a flower until the end of April, early May. But then it won't stop until the first night below 32 degrees. And what's great about this is almost every species of butterfly and bee will feed on the nectar of this thing. And then it starts producing berries as soon as it can in the spring. They're green. And by the end of summer and into fall, those berries turn black. And I have sat on the back porch and watched a bird land, walk into the lantana, and waddle out 10 minutes later. The birds love the berries. So if you want bees, butterflies, and birds with one plant, Texas lantana. Give it some space, put it in full sun, 6 hours a day. When we say full sun, botanically we mean 6 hours at least, and 6 or more hours of direct sunlight. This one will take 12 and be very happy. If you have a xeriscape, lantana is your plant. It can't get hot enough or sunny enough for Texas lantana. The flowers are beautiful, and there's a zillion of them on a well-established plant. Just know that once you plant it, you'll probably always have it. I've tried to dig it up. Inevitably a little berry has landed in the ground and taken seed. Beautiful plant. Black-eyed Susans, you see these all over the place, in highway medians especially, sometimes heavily in the spring. This plant has some call it gold, some call it yellow, I call it golden yellow. It can be almost orange and sometimes when they're really happy. Just like the coneflower I just mentioned, incredibly tough plant, very heat tolerant, will bloom in the hottest parts of the summer with no problem. The birds love the seeds on this thing, so it's great for attracting songbirds. Butterflies will feed on it too as well. Very hardy plant. And again, it won't get quite as tall as the coneflower, although I have seen some that are close to 4 feet, but they were well-established plants, very, very happy. So this will reseed and you'll get new plants, but it'll also come back from the same root zone again, year after year. And when it does that, it'll get wider, wider, wider. And I've seen clumps of this up to 3 feet across. Aromatic aster, you're about to start seeing this a lot. This blooms heaviest in October. And this is great if you're trying to stagger your planting so that you've got some stuff blooming in spring, some stuff blooming in summer, and then you need some fall bloomers. This is one of the best fall bloomers. The Aster oblongifolius is the native Texas variety. There are a lot of hybrids out there. This one's going to do fantastic for you. It's going to have that purple flower or pale blue, depending on your eyes. Very heat tolerant, can absolutely be planted in full sun, but people will plant this in spring and they'll come to me in June and go, it hasn't bloomed. Wait. They come back in August, it hasn't bloomed. Wait. It's going to bloom in fall. That's why it's called fall aster. And it does have a scent. The other name is aromatic aster. This can get quite large, easily 3 feet tall and wide, and it's just a mass of blooms. When it's in flower, you see more flower than you see foliage. Checking my time here, make sure I'm not going to talk all afternoon. Greg's bloom this flower. If you want to attract butterflies, especially queen butterflies, this is your plant. Now, here it says, can be invasive. That's a lie. It will be invasive. This spreads by rhizomes, underground runners, and if you plant a little of it, you'll have a lot of it. Do not plant this anywhere that you don't want it everywhere. But if people want it, I encourage them to try it in a pot to kind of contain it, or be ready to pull a few, just rip it out by the roots a couple of times a year. This thing will bloom prolifically, and this photo was taken at our nursery a few springs ago when the queen butterflies just descended on it. These are the plants sitting on the table, and the butterflies just, you saw more orange and black almost than you did flowers. Lavender blue flowers will bloom all summer and into fall. If you've got a very wet spot in your yard, this thing will tolerate wet feet with no problem. A lot of people have that trouble. Hey, this one spot in my yard, it's always wet, but it's also sunny. Throw Greg's Blue Mist in there. It'll be very, very happy. Just know it's going to spread. But wonderful plant for butterflies. Texas Bethany. This is an underused and underappreciated plant. It says 3 feet. I've never seen one get 3 feet in our soil. It's usually going to be about 1.5 to 2 feet. It can get 3 feet wide, but I've never seen it 3 feet tall. It will look like a salvia to a lot of people. It has a very distinct smell, and the stem is square. It's not a round stem. You can actually put your fingers on it and you can feel, oh, that's got corners. That's weird. Has a unique aroma to it. If you ever need smelling salts and don't have any, you could break off one of this and put it on your nose. It'll wake you up. Some call it pungent. I call it aromatic. It's up to you. It does smell like a weed, but wonderful, low-growing, bright red flower. Will bloom all summer. It loves the heat. So that's not a problem at all for this thing. And it has that tubular flower on it. It will attract hummingbirds, but it's got to be a hummingbird brave enough to be flying about a foot off the ground. So if you have cats, I would not recommend this plant. Moving on, Gara. Oh, Gara. Gara comes in white and hot pink, and then combinations of white and hot pink. Those are the only 3 colors. You only get 3 choices with Gara. And what I love about it, another name for this is whirling butterflies, because you've got the antenna of the butterfly on the stamens, you've got 2 big wings and 2 small wings. And they're at the top of the stem, so when the wind's blowing, it looks like there's 20, 30, 40, 50 butterflies flying around. There are a couple of different species. I've seen them get anywhere from 18 inches to 3 feet. Blooms heavily. The hard freeze of February did not affect the ones in my yard or the ones at work. So cold isn't a problem. It's hard into zone 5. Zone 5 would put you up into Kansas or the Dakotas. So cold is not an issue with this thing. Planted in full sun, it does need 6, 8, 10 hours of sun to really get a good bloom, but good grief, does it bloom. It says early summer. I've seen it start to bloom in April sometimes, but you do get a long bloom time with Agara. Flamacanthus. Now this is another one that people aren't patient about. This starts out, it looks like a green bush until the end of summer. Like September and October is when it's, usually end of August is when you'll see your first blooms on it. Doesn't do anything up until then. And it is going to be, it turns into a bush about 3 feet tall. But when it drops all of its leaves in winter, you can cut it back. Some people cut it all the way back, some people cut it halfway. It's going to look like a big woody tumbleweed in your yard if you don't do anything, because it's going to be completely bare of leaves all winter long. And it won't start flowering. It'll turn green in spring, it'll be green in summer, and it won't be until the very end of summer that it starts blooming. But it blooms in this dark burnt orange, Texas longhorn orange flower, and it blooms heavily. And so this is, again, if you're looking for something that's going to bloom at the end of the season when some other stuff has stopped blooming, this is a good choice. It's going to be a tall plant, and that makes it great for hummingbirds and pollinators that would like to not be crawling around on the ground. Also called hummingbird bush, and for obvious reasons. It's got a long fluted flower. Hummingbirds love to feed on this thing, and it is very, very heat and drought tolerant. All right, perennial favorites. There is some overlap here. The plants I'm about to show you will also attract hummingbirds and butterflies and bees. These are staff favorites. These are ones that I've had the most experience with, and these are also some of the most popular ones among our customers. Not that the ones we just talked about weren't, but let's move on to these. Autumn sage. Autumn sage is fantastic. It comes in so many colors. This year we had a new one at the store called Nuevo Leon, which is blue. But this blooms in red, white, salmon, pink, coral, and purple, and blue now. So the red one is the most popular. It's the true genome, if you will. It's the true genetics of this plant. This is also called cherry sage sometimes. But Salvia greggii, tried and true, you find it all over the state. It blooms a lot. It blooms even in the heat of the summer. It makes a sizable plant, about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. It will die back to the ground every year and start all over again every spring. It is deciduous. You could leave it upright and let it will leaf out on the old wood if you leave any old wood. But a lot of people will just cut it back to the ground so they don't have this giant bundle of sticks sitting in their garden. Again, masses of flowers. It's certainly the hardiest salvia, one of the most hardy salvias we sell. Not affected by heat, it's not affected by drought. The cold in February didn't phase it at all. We have 4 of them in our demonstration garden that look absolutely amazing. And it attracts lots of hummingbirds and butterflies. 4-nerve daisy. I love this plant. A lot of people don't know about it. This plant will bloom 12 months out of the year. Mine in my yard was blooming 1 week prior to the February freeze. And had it not been for the February freeze, I would have had 12 continuous months of bloom off this thing. It has an incredibly long taproot, so wherever you plant it, leave it. You're not going to be able to move it later. If you find one in the wild, don't even try to dig it up and transplant it. It won't work. But this thing will make, you'll start out with a gallon size. The best way to think of a gallon size perennial, think of a personal pizza. That personal pizza will turn into a family size pizza. It'll spread 2-3 feet across and just bloom its heart out all summer long. Again, mine bloomed in January. I've seen it blooming in February. Every month of the year, I've seen 4-nerve daisy bloom. Love it. It does look scraggly a little bit because all the foliage is half the height of the stems. The stems will pop up about 4 to 6 inches above the leaves. And you can deadhead it if you want. I like to take mine in the middle of the summer and just go out with some loppers and just cut all the blooms off, even the spent ones, and then it'll come right back and keep blooming. But except for that having to be deadheaded every now and then, wonderful plant, absolutely loves the sun and heat, will make a nice big area. You want to put this in some place that's very, very dry. This does not like to be wet. Its biggest habitat in the state would be the hill country and far west Texas, so it likes dry, sandy, hot soil. But we have it growing in the heavy clay here just fine. Blackfoot daisy. This thing will make a mass of flowers. This can easily get 3 feet across. It'll be higher in the middle, lower on the edges, and it smells like honey. If you're next to it on a warm day in June and the wind is blowing in your face, you're going to smell honey and you start craving pancakes in a hurry. This one absolutely does not like wet feet. If you want to kill it, plant it on top of a drip irrigation system. It wants to get bone dry between waterings. This looks great spilling over the boulders if you've got some big rocks at the edge of your flower bed, or you've got a rock garden. It'll just fill in all the crags and just bloom consistently. Once it starts blooming, it doesn't stop unless it gets really cold and that knocks it back, or you overwater it. But short of that, you've just never seen so many white flowers. The flowers are about the size of a nickel with a tiny yellow center. And again, I love the honey scent, and you will often hear this plant before you see it because the bees will be all over it. If you have to have an EpiPen with you at all times, you probably don't want to plant this because it will attract, the bees will find this if it's in your yard. But wonderful, wonderful native Texas plant. Zexminia, this is the plant that I recommend to people who can't grow anything. You come to me and say, I have a brown thumb, I can't get anything to grow. I will give you Zexminia. You tell me you don't know if you have sun or shade, I'll give you Zexminia. You tell me you have both, it's sunny and shade, I'll give you Zexminia. Zexminia will bloom the same in shade as it will in sun. Zexminia will spread to 3 feet tall. The plant, the flower, is at the very end of the stem. So imagine there's a flower at the tip of my finger. If I held up the stem, it would be 3 feet tall, but this plant is always leaning forward. So it's never actually 3 feet tall. It would be if you grabbed the stem and lifted it up. But it's going to be pointing toward you. Masses of yellow flowers. Again, put it in the ground, walk away, ignore it for the rest of your life, and it will bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom. Sun, doesn't matter. Shade, doesn't matter. It's not even too picky about how much water. I've seen it growing in a xeriscape where it's bone dry, and I've also seen it growing in a flower bed that gets with a drip irrigation system. Incredibly adaptable. I've yet to find anybody who can't grow Zexminia successfully. The only downside to Zexminia is that it takes forever to wake up. So you'll have all your other perennials. Hey, it's end of March, this is up, and I see that, and that's come back, and my Gara's come back, and my Forner is still blooming, and this is going great. Where's that Zexminia? It's the last perennial to wake up, but it will go from 0, because it will die back to the ground completely. It'll go from nothing to blooming in about 6 to 8 weeks, and then it won't stop blooming until the first hard freeze. All right, we're doing great. Okay, Augusta Dulberg. This is a wonderful white salvia. If you want to look for a white mealy cup sage or a salvia, this is it. What I love about this plant is the story behind it. It was discovered by a Texas horticulturist by the name of Greg Grant in a central Texas cemetery growing on the gravesite of Augusta Dulberg. It gets 3 feet tall and wide. It blooms prolifically all summer long. It looks amazing. It is a pure white. I mean, it's white as a white sheet of paper. Beautiful white all season long. And the other great part of this plant is that right next to Augusta's grave was her husband's grave. His name was Henry. And again, this plant had never been cataloged or listed in any plant database anywhere until Greg Grant found it. Right next to Augusta was her husband's grave, Henry. His was blooming in blue. That's a country song that has yet to be written, folks. I don't know why Pat Green hasn't jumped all over that. Blue flowers. Henry Dulberg, next to autumn sage. Henry Dulberg is our #1 selling salvia, hands down. A beautiful plant, 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide. We have 4 of them growing in our demonstration garden. They don't stop blooming all summer long. And it is blue, 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 blue. It's a dark, dark French blue, country blue, pick your blue. It's a beautiful blue color. It's not purple, it's blue. And it just looks amazing. Dies back to the ground completely and then comes back. And it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, okay, this plant is gonna die to the ground and I won't see it December, January, February. And then in a matter of weeks, it's gonna go from that to big, tall, and wide and blooming all summer. And then it's going to do that every year. And that's why I love perennials so much. You can just plant them in the ground and you're going to get the joy of those plants year after year. And as their root zones get bigger and the plants get more established and they get healthier, they're going to look better every year after that. I always tell people, put it in the ground, and then in 3 years, that plant's going to look amazing because its root zone will be big enough that it's going to come back strong every year. But Henry and Augusta Dulberg, two wonderful sages, same height, same width, same everything, growing side by side on different graves. One was blue, one was white. Beautiful plant, beautiful plant. Okay, imposters. I'll just talk about a couple of these real quick and then I'll open up for questions. Just going to give a couple of these here. There is a long list, but I narrowed it down. These are plants that you think are from Texas, but they ain't. And first up is Texas tarragon. The other name for this is Mexican mint marigold, which should give away where it's from. But I find a lot of folks still call this Texas tarragon. You can use it in cooking in place of tarragon. It is a culinary herb if you want it to be. This is what I like about this plant though, is that it's another fall bloomer. It'll bloom a little in the spring, won't do much of anything in the summer, and then it blooms heavily in the fall. So that's another plant if you want something in your yard that's blooming up until, probably Thanksgiving or whenever the first cold snap is. Consider this one. It does attract bees and butterflies. Bright yellow flowers, about the size of a dime or a nickel. It is drought tolerant once established. I think the leaves have a very pleasant scent. If you like to run your fingers through rosemary or lavender, you might also enjoy running your fingers through Texas tarragon or mint marigold and taking a whiff. It has a very pleasant smell to it. I like it a lot. And again, the plant is on average about 2 feet tall, 2 feet wide, and brilliant bright green foliage that really makes the yellow flowers pop on it. And then last is Texas pink skullcap. Not from Texas and not really pink, it's more red. This was discovered by a group of botanists from Texas. They actually brought it across the border from Mexico and then they sent it to a nursery in North Carolina, and the nursery in North Carolina gave it its name. So I don't know how they settled on Texas pink. This is a wonderful plant. I had some video of it, but I had trouble uploading it for some reason. I have one of these in my backyard. It's been in the ground for 8 years. I've never pruned it. It is 6 feet across and about 18 inches at the highest point. So it'll be taller in the middle, lower the sides. This thing grows like a blooming onion. So it'll send stems out and they'll pop up. And then the next row of stems comes out and pops up. And so it keeps getting wider and wider and wider. It'll get as wide as you let it, or until it runs into something. And it blooms with these pink, hot pink, light red flowers all summer long. Younger plants don't tend to bloom as much. You show me a plant that's 3 years or more old, it's going to be blooming heavily. Also loves it hot, loves it dry. The hotter and drier the better. And it will, again, it's got a similar flower to a salvia or to the Texas betony that I showed you, but the butterflies and the bees and the even hummingbirds will feed on it. It is going to be low though, again, not more than 18 inches tall, but it will spread and spread and spread and spread. In the winter, it will drop all of its leaves. I don't touch mine. It looks like a flat tumbleweed, but it's so big now, it's 6 feet across. I'm not going to mess with it. If you wanted to trim it up, the winter is the best time to shape it. If you wanted it to be smaller than it is, wait till all of its leaves are dropped, and sometime in December or January, you can go in and clean it up a little bit, and that won't hurt it. But again, native to Mexico, the flowers have kind of a snapdragon shape, but it will absolutely bloom all summer long. And I think, there we are. Okay, this slideshow has about 50 plants in it, and I just call, depending on what I'm going to do. There are a lot more native Texas plants that I can talk about. All of these are usually in stock and on sale in shades of green. Some of them I know I don't have because I was walking the yard this morning. But like I said, we grow most of these ourselves. We have five 40-foot long rows of tables filled with perennials. The most common size is the 1 gallon. Those run about $9.99. And then we also have a quart size, which is half that size. Some of them we have a 3 gallon. If you come to the nursery, you're going to pull in, park here, These tables are gone, you can park here. And these tables right over here, those are your perennial tables. They're marked, you'll find them. Again, that was just about a third of the perennials that are native that we could talk about. I would say of all the perennials that we carry, 40 to 45% are native to the state, and they're all marked by old Texas symbols. So if you're not sure, what you just saw on the screen is the same thing that's going to be on the card on the table. So if you see the Texas symbol, and the first line says native Texas perennial, you know it's native. If it's not, we don't, we make it as simple as we possibly can. So that's my presentation. Thank you for coming. Before you leave, or when you leave, Wilson, you'll be where?
I'll be right over here.
Wilson will be standing over here. He's got some moisture meters for you. If you didn't get a coupon for Shades of Green, I've got coupons to get you a free perennial. Real quickly, any questions before Wilson kicks me out? Yes, ma'am, in the pink.
I want to commend you for all the choices that you have. I'm a little bit sad with how much money I have spent with you, but everything is absolutely amazing. As a general rule with the perennials, would you recommend trimming them back or not?
It depends. I should have brought
I've
that.
got salvia, blackfoot daisy, hummingbird, butterfly, to be specific.
Salvia, Blackfoot. I wouldn't touch your Blackfoot. I don't trim my Blackfoot. The only time I trim my Blackfoot is just to keep it in check.
I lost a bunch.
Okay. I lost a third of mine. Salvias, I cut to the ground. Hummingbird, was it the Flamicanthus or the hyssop?
I don't know.
Okay. But was it the Flamicanthus, the tall bushy one?
The real pretty one,
Yeah, yeah. I cut mine. I leave enough above the ground that I can see it.
because the husband cut it way down, and it's still way down.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah, he did that. Yeah, again, if I'm going to do any pruning, I'm going to wait until after Thanksgiving. Our first frost date is typically mid-November. Sometime in the middle of November, that's when we're going to have our first night below 32 degrees. And that's going to be the signal to all these plants to, hey, you're done. Season's over. Now, you know, this is Texas. I've had Thanksgiving days where it's 75 degrees and we're playing football in the yard. I've had Thanksgiving days where there's snow on the ground. And I've lived in North Texas all my life. If we get our first freeze in mid-November and then the leaves start dropping on your plants, that's when I would go address them. Somewhere on our website is a PDF that tells you what to do with all the natives. And I didn't think about bringing that. Is my email address up there? It is not. Okay.
Do you currently have salvia in stock?
Yes, I've got Salvia Gregii in red and about 4 other colors.
Red one this time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
The native plants, are they grafted rabbits like that, or are those safe for rabbits?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay, is it not on your plants then?
Not usually because I've only got so much space, but you can ask me or anybody else that works there, we can tell you. And in general, they leave the salvias and sages alone. And if it's woody, they tend to leave it alone. I say that because I've had a lot of customers come in and say the rabbits ate their Indian hawthorns. Like a beaver, they just leveled them to the ground. In general, as a general rule, I would say that most of your natives are not going to be subject to rabbit damage. A lot of the adapted ones will be. They'll get mowed down and quick. But that's not true for every native perennial. And yes, rabbits are a pain in Collin County. Yes. When I first moved here, where the Tom Thumb is on Preston Road, that was an empty field, and we had 2 cats. That was corn. From Hillcrest to like Preston was nothing but cornfields. This is 1995, 96. We had 2 cats that would leave the house every night, and every morning there would be rabbits on our doorstep. But again, if they're out of control, we have 3 cats at the nursery just for that purpose, because rabbits will wreck a nursery in a heartbeat. Somebody else had a question? Yes.
Which of the plants that you highlighted today would be good if you have a dog that kind of runs around and goes behind gardening? Is there anything that's hardy in case a dog comes?
Yeah, anything that's taller, above anything in the 3-foot range that's woody, like the Flamicanthus would be great.
Just planted that this spring.
Salvia, any of the autumn sage, the Salvia greggii would be great. If you wanted to try ground cover, you could go with the horse herb. But to handle the intensity of dogs, you usually want something that's rigid, so woody, and higher up. Otherwise, I'll lay down on it. Yes, sir.
If I came over and spent all the rest of my money that you don't have already, would you advise planting anything at this time of year?
Yeah, we get this quite. We had a Labor Day. We had a sale on perennials for Labor Day weekend. Our landscape crew is installing landscapes 12 months out of the year. That's the beauty of living here in North Texas. Is in general we have pretty mild winters, and I've got no problem. It's hard. It's a hard sell in December trying to sell somebody a perennial that's gone dormant. I promise you, this is a beautiful plant, but it just looks like a bucket of dirt. But you give me $10. But right now they're all green. They're all flowering if they flower this time of year, and I have no problem putting the plant in the ground now because some of these, if winter comes on time, they've got 2.5 months before it gets cold. And if you get them in the ground now, I don't know that I would plant a perennial November 1st. I don't know that I would do it after mid-October. But if the month of September, absolutely. Get them in the ground now. They've got 2 months, maybe more, to get established and enjoy the warm weather. And then when they go dormant, even though there's nothing happening above ground, their roots are getting established. So come March, that plant will be bigger, stronger, healthier, and already established, as opposed to you buying a brand new plant in March and putting it in the ground. The plant, if I get 2 plants, the same plant, put one in the ground in September, one in the ground in March, the one that I put in the ground in September is going to be a bigger, healthier plant next summer than the one I put in the ground in March. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And we're happy to have your money, folks. That allows me to be here. Honest story. I moved to Frisco in '96. I shopped at Shades of Green for years. And then I realized, employee discount. I should go to work there. So I shopped there for about 10 years before I started working there. And the employee discount is very nice. And we are hiring currently. We need people. We need folks. Spring, as soon as it gets, this morning, if you walked out the door the last 2 mornings, that's football weather, folks. We're about to get busy. Pumpkins arrive next week, and then we roll right into Christmas trees. It's mums and crotons, and it's about to be pansies for days. So if you're looking for part-time, full-time, call us. We need people. Cashiers, sales staff, if you have any plant knowledge at all, that's a plus. Who else had a hand up back here? Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions. One is on the perennials that lose their leaves and you're kind of left with a skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
Is that typically in our area about only 3 months of the year that you're left with a skeleton?
Yeah, it's typically December, January, February, because most of them will start leafing out in mid-March. Our last frost date is typically March 15th. So it's real simple. November 15th, March 15th. So March 15th, now, anyone who's lived here more than 10 years knows that we get a cold snap right around Easter almost every year. So it's like we may not get below freezing, but it's going to get chilly at least one more time. But yes, in general, you're just looking at 3 months, and 9 months out of the year, you've got at least a leaf on the thing. And for most of these plants, they're going to bloom somewhere between 3 and 6-8 months. So they do have a long bloom time, and you don't have to replant them next year, or the year after, or the year after.
And so on those that die back, and let's say there's some, like you said, that you cut back to the ground, salvia or whatnot. In their place, would you be able to plant something else that can bloom during that time?
Yeah, I plant pansies around a lot of my annuals. Now, pansies are great because pansies will bloom, despite the name, they're not wimpy plants. They will bloom with snow on them, they will bloom with ice on them. The only downside to pansies, now pansies need full sun. Their smaller cousin, violas, can tolerate a little shade. They both, violas especially, will reseed prolifically because they're not going to compete with each other. So I plant pansies. When my perennials die back, I'll put pansies there. The pansies will bloom until it gets hot in March, and then they're just going to be toast, and you can just pop those out of the ground. The only downside to that, I mean, that's one of the best cold weather plants out there is pansies. It's our #1 seller during the winter for sure. Rabbits love them. It is salad for rabbits. But the petals, the flowers of pansies are edible. So, you know, if you grow them by seed and you know that they haven't come from a nursery that's doused them in, or a grower that's doused them in fertilizer to make them look really amazing, pick the petals off, throw them in your salad. The petals of pansies have a taste like spinach, okay? So they're yummy for humans, but rabbits absolutely love them. You'll know it's rabbits because you'll go out one morning and all the flowers are gone. You'll come out the next morning and all the leaves are gone. They don't eat them both at the same time. But if you come out and all the flowers have disappeared, it's a rabbit. The only thing you can do in that situation is put down a scent deterrent. Blood meal is what's most often used. Blood meal to a rabbit smells like a dead animal. It will smell like that to you when you first open the bag. The scent dissipates pretty quickly for humans because our sense of smell isn't nearly what a rabbit's is. But blood meal is also one of the best fertilizers for pansies. So not only are you going to have an amazing bloom that will deter the rabbits, but I know people that have put blood meal on by the pound and they've still lost all their pansies. Another option though that rabbits tend to eat a little less is dianthus. Sweet William comes in pinks, whites, reds, has those crinkly edges to it. A nice little flower between 6 inches and 10 inches tall, depending on the variety. Dianthus is really cold hardy. It probably won't still be alive in late January after a lot of cold, but it will bloom well past Christmas in a normal Collin County winter. So Dianthus is an option as well. But absolutely, you can interplant cool season annuals amongst your perennials so that there's something there. Anybody else? And then I will wrap it up. Y'all can go home, and then I'll stick around and answer a few more questions. Yes, ma'am. If you're going to do it by seed, you want to do it in fall, usually in November, for both. Because you want to get them in the ground in the winter while they're dormant, and then they'll already be in the ground, they'll be getting wet, and then the seed will know, hey, it's warm enough for me to sprout. Yes, we have not been restocking our seed yet. That is supposed to happen in the next 2 weeks. I know I've got bluebonnet seed. I don't know if I have the black-eyed Susan seed. But yeah, if you're going to sow wildflowers or any of these perennials by seed, you want to do it in the fall, at the end of the year, usually in November, October, somewhere in there, and then they will sprout come next spring. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I will stay right here and answer. You can come up and answer questions. Hang on, one last one. What was the question?
Keep away mosquitoes.
Oh, mosquito plants. We get this question. Some people swear by this. Some people swear that this works, and some say that it doesn't have any effect. But in general, citrosa, which is the citronella plant, that's actually I just blacked out of it. Geranium, thank you. Citrosa is a geranium, and it will have a blue flower on it. That plant can get up to 3 feet tall and wide, and has a citrusy scent to it. Pretty much anything lemon, lemongrass, lemon balm, lemon verbena, lemon thyme, anything with a citrus in front of it, usually lemon. The citrusy scent seems to work. Some people swear by rosemary. I've never seen any effect with rosemary. One though that was used by the Native Americans for years is American beautyberry. And that's actually a low-growing tree, about 8 feet tall. It's an understory tree. It needs to be under the shade of something else, dapple shade or part sunlight. American beautyberry, it's a big bush or a low tree that has a bubblegum pink berry on it in the fall that birds absolutely love. And Native Americans would break those leaves up and rub them all over themselves for mosquito prevention. So, unfortunately, my beautyberry is in the front yard of the ex-wife's house, so I don't get to enjoy that. But again, citrosa, which is basically a geranium, and then any of your lemons. Most of those plants, though, are herbs. They will die back in the winter. Lemongrass doesn't survive the winter here at all. It's an annual. Anything lemon or citronella are the most popular. Again, some people swear that they work. Some people said they've had no effect. I can't speak to it. We've had mixed results. But anyway, Wilson, you're there. You're where you need to be. Thank y'all. I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Appreciate it. Come see us in Shades of Green.